Good evening. Today is Monday, January 11th, 2021. It is 5 p.m. This is the Westwood Select Board. This meeting is being held via Zoom. This is pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 23rd, 2020 emergency order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation via the Zoom functioning. This meeting is live streamed and is available via video at the Westwood Media Center page. Thank you all for attending. We have a robust agenda this evening. I'm just going to jump right into the chairman's update and remind all Westwood residents that we are now accepting applications for the John J. Cronin Public Service Award. This award is named for the late John J. Cronin, who was our town treasurer. For many years, he selflessly gave of his time for the betterment of the community, both as an elected official and in numerous volunteer activities within and outside of the community. The past recipients include Steve Rafsky last year, Michael Crone the year before, Marjorie Aramo, Maureen Blade, Joseph Clancy, and going back to 2013, Gerard Cronin. All nominations should be submitted to the Select Board office at Town Hall. The award will be presented at the upcoming 2020 Spring Annual Town Meeting. Please contact the Select Board office at selectboard@townhall.westwood.ma.us or call us to submit a nomination. There are forms that will be available and sent to you. We have a good challenge every year in that we have to really select from a great group. So I hope this year again we have a number of nominees. So please participate. Okay, with that aside, I'll move on to our scheduled action. And I want to first welcome the Planning Board. We will be going through a process tonight to select an individual to serve on the Planning Board. Before I get too far into that, though, I want to welcome Dave Atkins, the Planning Board Chair. Dave, do you want to introduce your members or have people introduce themselves? You're on mute.
Yeah, I think we can go around and just introduce ourselves. I'll say the next person. So I'm Dave Atkins. Chris, you want to go next?
I'm Chris Paff.
And
Rob
Gotti.
And Deb Conant.
And Debbie Conant's here as well. Okay. So a little bit of background. The vacancy on the five-member planning board was caused when William DeLay resigned shortly after moving out of the town of Westwood. Mr. DeLay sold his home on December 14th and resigned from the planning board on December 15th. On December 18th, the vacancy was posted and initially 6 applicants submitted notice to the town of their interests. 2 applicants subsequently withdrew their applications. The planning board is a 5-member board with statutory authority to review and approve development projects throughout the town of Westwood. The planning board typically meets on Tuesday evenings twice a month to review development applications and will hold zoning amendment public hearings. The selected candidate tonight will be expected to review board packets, attend meetings presently held via Zoom, and act as a full voting member until the conclusion of annual town meeting, which is planned for May 3rd, 2021. On April 27th, 2021, there will be an annual town election, and this seat will be on the ballot. That election will be to fill the seat for the remainder of its term, which is 1 year, until the end of town meeting in May of 2022. The statutory authority for this meeting is contained in Chapter 41, Section 11 of the Massachusetts General Laws, which state that any vacancy created in an elected position requires that the elected board upon which the vacancy exists and the select board, serving as the chief executive officers of the community, meet in a joint session and select and appoint by roll call, majority vote of the members of both boards present, the candidate to fill the vacancy until the next town election. The remaining term, if any, is then to be filled by a candidate elected by the registered voters in the community. So last week, Mr. Atkins and I and town council tried to work out some sort of a process because the statute talks about majority vote, but doesn't then give you the process. You have to design one. So the four applicants will be asked the same questions, same three questions. Voting members of this joint session may then ask a follow-up question to clarify a response to the question that was asked. Questions that have not been submitted to the chair in advance will not be allowed. At the conclusion of interviewing the four candidates, nominations will be accepted. An applicant must receive a nomination from a voting member and a second vote from a different voting member. At the close of nominations, the voting members will be asked who they cast their vote for from the nominees. A nominee must receive 4 of 7 votes to be the final nominee to the planning board vacancy. If after the first roll of votes there is no majority winner, the nominee with the least number of votes will be dropped and the second roll will be called. We would go through 3 iterations of that type of vote. And if there's no nominee who has secured 4 votes at that time, there would be a 4th roll call vote, and the individual with the most number of votes would be the nominee. Once this process results in a nominee who has secured enough votes, there will be a nomination for appointment to the planning board, and a roll call vote shall be taken at that time. Are there any questions on that kind of complicated process? We tried to make it as simple as possible, but it wasn't easy. Okay, so I want to introduce the 4 individuals who are joining us this evening who have applied. And I first want to thank you all very much. It's kind of fitting that we talked about the John Cronin Award a moment ago. We have been made such a great town because so many people have stepped forward to offer their service. So joining us this evening is Mr. Eric Alden, Mr. Philip Giordano, Mr. Michael McCusker, and Ms. Kate Wynn. And I tried 2 different ways to randomize these, and I kind of came out with the same result. So I'm just going to go in alphabetical order. I hope you'll all forgive me.
I figured that would
So
be
with that, I tried to do last digit of your street address, and then I did it by first name alphabetical, and I kept getting the same order. So I'm just going to stick with the most simple way. So with that, I'm going to introduce Mr. Eric Alden. Eric, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
And I have 3 fairly quick questions, and you can be as broad as you want in answering them. And the first is, what in your background speaks to you being prepared to step into the role of planning board member?
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Well, initially, in thinking about the position, I had a conversation with a longtime, now retired select board member who was my neighbor. And a few years ago, he sort of thought I'd be a good fit for, for this planning board. And at the time I said, I'm going to start off a little slower. So I'm on, I ran for the housing authority, and I currently sit on that board. But in reading the qualifications, what you're looking for basically came down to a few items, a few bullet points. Someone who could understand building code, zoning bylaws, can plan review, and understands real estate. And I fit all those. I'm in the real estate business. I've developed properties. I've been involved in town planning, and I'm in the housing and real estate and development industry. So I can fit all those bullet points there.
Describe what you think serving on the planning board means. You kind of have done that, but give us really 2 specific points of what you would see as action items you would be expected to perform.
Yeah, so what I did to prepare for sort of hitting the ground running was to sit over the past 2 weeks and watch every single planning board meeting. It's good stuff to watch right before you go into bed. But I think what's important is really listening to what's smart for the town and what the people, what the residents are passionate about. I'm pro smart development. I think the town needs to develop if it fits, the scope of our town to move forward. And but I believe that the residents also should have their voice heard at these meetings. And that would be something I would like to do, make sure that everyone in town is represented.
Well, hopefully watching all those will help you with question 3. So what, if any, projects are you familiar with that have come before the planning board in recent years? Explain what you know about the details of the projects.
Yeah, initially I started following the University Station project years ago when that first came up. That made for some of the best town meetings I've ever been to. But more recently, all the development that's happening in Islington, the solar project I followed, the project with the new school. I typically stay up on most of the development that's happening in town.
Thank you. Do any of the members of and I'll just go in order, starting with the select board. Mrs. Hyde, any questions? No. Mr. Walsh, Mr. Atkins, Mr. Paff, Mr. Gotti, Mr. Conant, anything? Go ahead. You're on mute, Deb.
Sorry. Eric, thank you so much for applying. I saw that you're a member of the Resident Planning Commission in Ludlow.
Yes.
How long have you been doing that for?
About a year now. That's Ludlow, Vermont, not Ludlow, Massachusetts.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a second home up there. I'm pretty involved in the town up there. They don't allow you to be an actual full-fledged elected official unless you're a full-time resident there. But the duties are the same. The voice is the same. So I've been pretty involved in it over the past 2 years, and from a distance, probably the past 5 years.
Okay. And do I understand you own a management company? Is that true?
I do, yes.
Yeah. How would you describe your attention to detail when it comes to that?
I'm working with other people's money, so I have, they force me to be attentive. We have a lot of investors that we come in and we purchase property for them, and we develop it or we renovate it and we hold it and rent it. So yeah, we're pretty to the penny on all costs and the management of their funds. Otherwise, we wouldn't have much clients.
And your thoughts of pursuing a permanent position on the board?
I'm sorry?
Your thoughts on pursuing a permanent position on the board?
Yes, I would go with this position, and it would be in my intention to run for a position, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Alden, thank you very much.
My pleasure. I appreciate the
Stick around.
opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Philip Giordano. Welcome.
Welcome. Hello.
And I'll just jump right into the questions. Can you talk about your background and how it has prepared you to step into the role of planning board?
As you may have seen from my application, I've been an attorney for over 30 years. The portion of my practice is not specifically geared towards real estate. I have had quite a bit of experience in real estate, but I am generally involved more in securities and have represented hedge funds and do a higher level complex form of practice. One of the things, though, that working in with financial industry participants, hedge funds, et cetera, has taught me is that you've got to be prepared, you got to be detail oriented, you have to know what it is the industry is about, you have to know what the people are about in order to be able to make an argument or to even have some, cogent arguments as to what your thoughts are, your position are, et cetera. I feel comfortable in the real estate field. I have, I would say, only a limited amount of zoning work, but I represent a couple of developers with respect to some of their work. I've been in the land court, and I think that I've skimmed, I will say, the zoning bylaws, but a couple hundred pages are not something I've committed to memory. But I've been a resident of Westwood for 22 years, have raised 4 children here, have coached almost every sport that you could probably have. And I am interested in continuing to participate in what's going on in the school. Now that my kids are older, I want to be involved in the town. And this looked like an interesting opportunity. And I think I could bring an interesting perspective to some of the issues that may come up. So,
Great, thank you. And describe what you think serving on the planning board means. Give us at least 2 points of what you think would be the actions you'd be expected to perform.
well, clearly, one of the tension that often exists between development people's concern over open spaces is something that I think is at the forefront of all of us. The recent solar projects, some of the issues that have arisen with respect to the solar issues in the school project, I think demonstrate that tension, and bringing that balance to bear is something that I think are important. Obviously, trying to find that particular sweet spot on a issue by issue, project by project basis is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. But I think that I certainly could bring in a differing perspective, and certainly would be, I think that trying to make sure that we have smart development, but at the same time recognizing that the people that are in this town are committed to the character and the open spaces, and continuing to make sure that they make their choices in where they live and where they bring up their children in an appropriate way. I think those are going to be the primary issues that are going to be coming up in the future for the town.
That's great. And what, if any, projects are you familiar with that have come before the planning board? What do you know about their status?
Only being a resident, then it's easy. It's obviously Islington and as I mentioned, the solar project. Seeing and have been apprised of some of the, mostly the public pronouncements, have watched what has been going on with interest, just because I'm interested in the town. I know one of the things that I am hopeful of is to make sure that, and it's easier said than done, but town engagement obviously is important, to make sure that people understand that their voices are heard and that their views are being taken into account for members of this board, other aspects and portions of the town, because it is important for the people to believe and understand that everyone here is their representative and acting on their behalf and trying to give their best judgments on what is good for the town. So those are some of the things that I know of, some of the recent issues that have arisen in the town.
Great, thank you. From the select board, any questions? No, okay, from the planning board, Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, I would just ask, it came up, both of you brought this up, so if Mr. Alden wanted to also address this, would be, what role do you think the planning board would have with respect to a solar development of a solar array in a field?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, some of the issues that were raised with respect to the balance between green space, trees, and obviously needing solar renewable energy. And I think part of it is outreach and part of it is educational. I just know, having seen some of the commentary, some of the information that was circulating around among some of the residents, that it is easier said than done at times to be able to say, well, why don't we just simply put solar on every parking lot or every building or something like that? Whereas there's a whole facet of issues, costs, et cetera, that have to come into that kind of analysis. I think some of what is important is education, outreach, and trying to make sure that people have, in, I don't want to say layman terms, but summary terms, and then to be able to make sure that they know a little bit more about what's going on. There's a lot of outreach that I think would be really helpful for the town, that would work. And I think that would be something that the planning board, which has also a longer term horizon in terms of its perspective, would be useful, because then you can develop the support and the residents' support for what you're doing and what the town is doing.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Giordano. We
Thank
are
you.
going to move on to our next applicant, Mr. Michael McCusker. Michael, thank you.
John, Debbie's got her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
So are we allowed to all ask questions or you just?
Well, the ground rules were that we would just ask follow-ups to what was originally asked, but, you know, if you have a question, I mean, I would just ask it.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, again, to thank him for applying for the position. And I really was impressed with his cover letter in terms of the fact that sometimes the character and aesthetics of the town gets lost in the shuffle. And I do think that the question of solar was sort of beyond the scope of the interview. And I think that having someone from a legal standpoint is an asset for the planning board. And I thought that, you know, his answers were very good, and hopefully there's going to be, I don't know if there's any more follow-up from other people or if it's just going to end with me.
Well, this is not discussion. If you have a specific question for the applicant?
No, I just wanted to compliment him on his cover letter and to, you know, say, as I said before, that sometimes a lot of what he reiterated gets lost in the shuffle, and that it was well worded.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So at that, I will move on and welcome Mr. McCusker. Welcome. Thank you for applying and thank you for joining us this evening.
Hello, everyone.
Can you talk about your background and how it has prepared you to step into the role of planning board member?
I am a former member of the board, most recently 2019. I also serve on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I also am the chairman of the Housing Partnership. I think my experience with the boards has taught me my role in what is expected of a member of the board. And I think I could slide right in without much, without much of a recharge to get everyone up to speed.
So that might be a segue to the second one. What do you think serving on the planning board member as a planning board member means? But give 2 specific action items that are expected of planning board members.
Well, I think what's really important is to keep the meetings moving along, to ask the questions that you need information on, and maybe your constituents need information in, to make the best decisions. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to what's in the best interest of the town of Westwood.
And Michael, describe projects that you are familiar with that have come before the planning board in recent years, and what is your understanding of the status of those projects?
In the most recent years, in these last 2 years, I know they just finished the draft of the forgive me for a second, the town plan, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they're working on right now coming up with some for town meeting for some of the forgive me, I've got a lot going on here. For the upcoming town meeting, we've got to come up with a few ideas. I know those are pending. I know that the Islington Center is still ongoing, and I know they were just recently in for minor modification, and maybe something more will come down from there. I like to think I'm a little up to speed on what's going on there today. Again, it wasn't that long ago I walked away.
All right. Any follow-up from the select board, from the planning board? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and you're welcome to stay. With that, I will move on to Ms. Nguyen. Kate Nguyen, thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for applying.
Can you hear me okay?
I couldn't hear you at first, but I can hear you now. Can you describe in your background what speaks to you being prepared to step into the role of planning board member?
Sure. Thank you for asking. I appreciate the opportunity. So recently I was part of the steering committee that created that comprehensive plan for the town, pulled that together, which the planning board recently approved. Currently I sit on FinCom. That's very, very new, and I am enjoying that. I was also on the Ped Bike Committee, as you saw in my resume, for a little over 2 years, and a member of the Housing Partnership as well for a little over 2 years.
Okay, and describe what you think serving on the planning board means and give us 2 examples of action items.
So I laugh every time you ask that question, because I'm just going to say, I think it means an awful lot of work. The planning board does a lot of work, as does the select board, week after week. So I'm very grateful to everybody for the service that you're doing for the town. But I think that's a big piece of it, is just being ready to do that much work every week, have looked at the materials that are provided to you ahead of time, so that you're not wasting time for the group. So that would be action 1, is just be ready. And probably action 2 is to just maintain an awareness of the fine balance that the board shows between the desires of the individual citizens to maximize the value and the enjoyment that they're getting of their property, with what the constraints are for what people can do on their property, and how it fits into the overall community that we all live in.
Great, thank you. And what, if any, projects are you familiar with that have come before the planning board in recent years, and explain what you know about the status of the projects as well.
Right. So because I was on the Ped Bike Committee, I'm well aware of the sidewalks almost everywhere. And also the development over at the former Westwood Lodge property, and which the selection of which units would be for the 40B program there. So I'm not as up to speed as I'd like to be, but I'm certainly interested in our 40B program across the town, and where those homes may or may not be. I'm also aware of the 40B results that we're waiting to understand from the state to the census, and how that might impact the plans for the town. Also aware of the issue about, and I might not be naming this correctly, but the idea of where we can put health centers in the town, and how the zoning needs to be adjusted or not for that purpose. But also, Gay Street Sidewalk is one of my favorite projects that is stagnant right now, I believe. And the school is just around, the new school will be just around the corner from me. So that's of course of interest. And everybody also has also spoken about Islington Center, which, the status of the library. There's a lot going on.
It's great, thank you. Any follow-up from the select board? Nope. From the planning board, Mr. Atkins? Looks like Ms. Conant.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for applying. Just a quick question. You've only been on FinCom for a few months, and why the sudden urge to switch over to planning board?
Oh, it's a great question. So it's not a sudden urge, it's a sudden opportunity to get onto the planning board without having to run. So although there would be, if I chose to stay on the board, I would have to run later, but I have long wanted to be part of the planning board, and was delighted to even see an opportunity. So, but I'd also be very, I'm enjoying my time in FinCom, and my intention is to serve in that role if this doesn't work out.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes.
could, if we can ask Phil and Mike what their intentions are in terms of an interim appointment versus running in April, just so we hear on that topic from everyone.
Sure. We'll start with you, Mr. Alden.
Oh, Eric spoke.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Giordano.
Hi, I'll echo Ms. Nguyen. I saw that the opportunity that would be by A, getting some experience, and B, having the entree. I was planning on running. I think it's a great opportunity to serve, and that's my hope. So
Great. Mr. McCusker?
With this COVID and at work, I cannot commit right now to running after this appointment would be up. If I was so lucky to be selected, does not mean I would not. It's just, I don't have an answer at this very moment.
Anything else from members? Okay. So at this point, I would move to open the floor for nominations. If anybody has a nomination of the four who've presented themselves this evening.
John, if I can speak, and I think Deb has referred to this in her comments, but I'm going to broaden it. We are really lucky to have such a great pool of candidates. And so I say to each and every one of you, thank you. One, for stepping forward, and two, for giving this the consideration that you have, because I think any one of you would be a great addition to the board. So to the extent we choose one for the next 4 months, which is what we're talking about, that is by no means a negative reflection on the other three of you. I am just, so happy to see that we have the quality of people stepping forward and raising their hand to offer their time and talents. And there will be opportunities going forward. So if this isn't the time, please do pursue this. There is that barrier to entry. I think, Kate, that's probably what you were talking about. It's like, I really don't want to run, but I'm really interested. And yes, running is putting yourself out there. And some of us, well, those of us on these two boards have done that. And it's not always the easiest thing, but if you're passionate about it, it's worth that hurdle. So I would encourage any one of you to, or all of you, to not lose your interest, because we're always looking for people with the skills that you're offering and the interest that you're all providing. So I want to say thank you again. And I'll make a nomination since I will. For a very specific reason and not reflective of comparing one of you to the others or vice versa, I think that the fact that Mike McCusker has already served on the planning board makes it a very seamless transition. He was involved in a lot of very important matters, a variety of things. And I just think that kind of experience suits the 4-month slot. So I'll nominate Mike McCusker.
Okay, is there a second?
No.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Do we have any other nominations?
John, I'll nominate Kate Wynn.
Do we have a second?
You can barely hear you, John.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have a second of the nomination of Kate Wynn?
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Phil.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. Not hearing a second. Are there any further nominations? I would ask for a motion to close nominations.
So
Is there a
moved.
motion to close or a second to close nominations?
Second.
Okay. At this time, we have 2 nominations. There is a motion and a second to close nominations. Are the boards, we have to do this by roll call because we're on Zoom. So I'll take a roll of closing nominations. I will start with the select board. Mrs. Hyde,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
Mr. Atkins,
Aye.
Ms. Conant,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and Mr. Paff.
Aye.
Okay. So is there any discussion of the two nominations we have in front of us? We have Michael McCusker and Kate Wynn. Hearing-
Sorry,
Go ahead.
John, I'll echo what Nancy said about Mike and the nature of this position, a 4-month. The board is in need of some experience right now, and we are coming into kind of the bylaw season, and we do have some bylaw changes on tap, and I think in addition to understanding the application process that may come up between now and April, understanding the process of the bylaws, I think, and the discussion around that can be very helpful to the board. I wish that all, as Nancy said, everyone had an opportunity to that submitted their name for this had an opportunity to join a board or something in town, because they are incredibly talented. And I mentioned that during the comprehensive plan. I was really amazed at the level of talent that we had in our town, and I think these 4 applicants reflect that. So as I said before, the nature of the position is temporary, and I think someone who has done the job and can step in with very little to no learning curve can be the best solution to our problem at this particular time.
Thank you, Chris. I just want to echo that. I know we started out the night talking about the John Cronin Award. This will be the second time that I will sit on that committee to select, and it is always a really good problem to have. We've just had such talented people step forward over the years, and how do we recognize and select? But there is a home for everybody, and believe me, all 4 of you, regardless of tonight's outcome, will be tapped for some project. So is there any other commentary, discussion, Mr. Gotti?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what you just said, John. I'd just say this is a real high quality problem to have so many qualified applicants. And I wish the process itself allowed us to have even a little bit more vetting. I mean, while we have some sense of each because of these questions, I wish there was a little more opportunity for, vetting and understanding each of them in a little deeper way. I mean, it's hard to make these types of decisions in a 3-question, sort of serial interview. So I think you all did a wonderful job, and I would hope to see you continue to seek open positions as they come up.
Thank you, Rob. Mr. Atkins?
And not to be repeating things, but it bears repeating that we are lucky to have this problem here today, to have 4 people who are interested in this position, and all of whom deserve consideration and would make great members of the board. So I do want to thank everybody again for putting themselves out there like this, and it is a difficult choice. So thank you again.
Okay, with that, I will now call the roll. There are 2 nominees, Kate Wynn and Michael McCusker. I will call the roll and ask each of the 7 voting members for whom it is you vote. So we'll start with the select board. Mrs. Hyde?
I'll vote for Mike McCusker.
Walsh?
Kate Wynn?
Mr. Atkins?
Kate Wynn.
Ms. Conant?
I vote no on both.
What's that?
I vote no on both.
Oh, okay. Mr. Gotti?
You're muted, Rob.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Cusker.
McCusker. Mr. Paff?
Mike McCusker.
Okay. And I will cast my vote for Mr. McCusker as well. So that is 4 votes for Michael McCusker and 2 votes for Kate Wynn and 1 abstention. Deb, can I categorize that as an abstention? I think that's
I think it's a no vote,
Okay.
both.
All right. Okay, I'll leave it at that. So with the 4 votes, Mr. McCusker has achieved a majority of the voting members, and I would ask for a motion to appoint him to the planning board.
I move we appoint Mike McCusker to the open planning board position for a term to expire at the conclusion of the May 2021 annual town meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so that was Mr. Walsh seconded. Okay, I will now call a roll. Mrs. Hyde,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
Mr. Atkins,
Aye.
Ms. Conant. I'm sorry.
No,
No, okay, sorry. Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
Mr. Paff,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Okay, so I mean, again, the thank you is not enough. I appreciate all of you, and we are going to be in touch with you all and, continue the trajectory of service. And Mr. McCusker, the town planner, Abby McCabe, will be in touch with you to talk about next steps. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you all very much.
Thank
You're
you
all
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good time, everyone.
You're all welcome to stay.
Mr. Giordano, nice to see you, sir.
Mr. Ahern, it's been a while, but nice to see you once again.
Very good. And you too, Mr. Alden.
Take care.
Okay,
John,
We're gonna move-
John, there was a question in the question and answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Now or later.
Ish, can you read it? I can't see it.
It says, what happens to
What happens to the open ZBA position? Did you hear me?
Yeah, I did. I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Mr. Hearn?
I don't know that there is an open ZBA position.
Right.
There's nothing that says Mr. McCusker has to resign from the ZBA at this point in time. And there are alternate members who can fill in for him until such time as he makes that decision, if there was a conflict of interest.
Okay, we are moving on to Canton Street sidewalk design preliminary stage. Todd Korchin, our director of the DPW, is here this evening. Todd, I know you have some guests. Do you want to just have people introduce themselves?
Sure. We have from TEC, we have Mike Myers and Jake Carmody.
Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Todd, I'm going to turn it over to you guys, okay?
Sure. Just going back a little bit of history, through some funding that we had received from the future Topgolf development to be developed in Canton off of Dedham Street in Canton, which obviously in Westwood is Canton Street. We were able to embark on the very, very, very early stages of a potential sidewalk project along Canton Street. We are looking to push this as a potential TIP project, which would mean it would be funded from the state level as far as construction goes. That said, like I had mentioned, we're at the very, very early preliminary stages of this design. And as with everything throughout town, we like to obviously heavily involve the public, especially throughout the design process. We're at the point right now where there are certain benchmarks and criteria that we need to meet with respect to the state process if we are on that route to pursue that funding. And obviously with the way that we operate, like I said, the involvement with the public and, soliciting feedback at the early stages all the way through completion of the design is something that we want to do. It's our goal tonight. Mike has a few slides to just show essentially where we are in the design process, again, very early stages, and then to obtain the support and endorsement from the select board members to continue on with our design, but now start the public meeting process and do it from a virtual platform. This is unique because obviously it's a Canton Street sidewalk. We've had various designs and presentations in other locations in town that we've had an overwhelming amount of attendees, feedback and whatnot. And I'm sure the board members are familiar with TEC and their work in the past in town. They've done a tremendous job with Safe Routes to School projects, a couple of successful streets projects, and handle all of our transportation needs in town. So that said, I have Jake and Mike here. They want to show a few slides of where we stand, and hopefully we can proceed with where we are. That's it, Mike.
Okay. Try to share my screen here. Everyone see that okay?
There we go.
Good. Okay. Nice to see everybody. Just got a few slides here. Really, as Todd mentioned, it's such an early stage. Just want to kind of give you an update, kind of look back a little bit. Just to kind of refresh everybody of the project limits. Pretty straightforward. It's about just under 2 miles of Canton Street from the East Street Rotary down to University Ave. Shown here on the right is just a snapshot of the Blue Hill Drive bike lanes that went in as part of Complete Streets, and Forbes Road sidewalk that was included as part of Safe Routes to School. So it would certainly complement 2 other funding opportunities that the town took advantage of previously. So when we take a look back, and going down, as Todd mentioned, going down the path of a TIP project, there were a number of reasons that made Canton Street, make Canton Street such an attractive option to pursue TIP funding, as opposed to a capital project that may, really focus on maintenance, trying to upkeep the pavement, markings, stormwater, things like that, and do a more complete project. DOT wants to invest the money once, they want to do it right. They don't want to come back and redo anything in our lifetime anyway. So, any TIP project, as I'm sure you're aware, is a very comprehensive design and construction process. We talked about this back on Gay Street, but I'm sure everyone's pretty aware that in order to be eligible for the TIP funding, we do have to include bicycle and pedestrian accommodations within the improvements. When we look at this corridor compared to Gay Street, one of the biggest differences is the public way. Gay Street's like 40 feet wide, whereas Canton Street's much wider in a lot of locations, upwards of 60 feet in width. So the feasibility is there to try and look at bicycle or include bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, not to mention just the pure density of the residential areas and the destinations with University Ave, Downey School, that make this, a corridor that would truly benefit from the Complete Streets improvements. So these 2 graphics are meant to be, very, very high level. Not a lot of detail has gone into these, but really just trying to convey two things with the approach and how we approach a bicycle accommodation. It's basically done 2 ways. You either put the bikes on the street or you put the bikes off the street. Down on the bottom left here, you can see what it may look like with bicycle accommodations in the road. And what that entails is a 5-foot wide bike lane, and for a corridor like Canton Street, potentially separating the bike lane from the lane. So the bike lane's about 5 feet, the buffer's about 2 feet. So you can start to see, all right, we got to add 5 to 7 feet on each side of the road. And as I'm walking through this, you're probably thinking how this, really conflicts with everything that the Canton Street traffic calming project has achieved over the years. So we don't really see that as a valid option, because it would simply widen the road, wider road, people are more comfortable, they drive at higher speeds. So the bottom right just kind of gives you a snapshot of what it would look like to put bikes off the road. And that's typically done through a 10-foot wide, they call it a shared use path. The 10 feet gives you enough space so that you could have a bike going in each direction. People can still walk on there with plenty of space. And then on the right side there, showing a 5-foot wide sidewalk to accommodate the pedestrians. So again, though, we really see one pretty clear path for this project, which would be the shared use path, getting the bikes off the road, and that's what MassDOT typically likes to see with a lot of their Complete Streets projects. So just kind of recapping, back in the summer of 2019 is when we initiated the project. We had an initial meeting with MassDOT in the fall of 2019, did some very preliminary engineering, due diligence, just to really make sure there's a project here, make sure that it's feasible, make sure that the project aligns with, the parameters of the TIP program. And we do feel it does. So that was, beginning of 2020, we were at that stage and we were ready to get everyone together at the Downey School or wherever and meet with the community on this. And obviously we all know what happened then. So we've been kind of hitting pause through 2020. And as we look ahead, what we've done in other communities and it's been successful is try a virtual public outreach session, get some feedback from the community, roll that into what we're tasked to do right now, which is just the 25% MassDOT design. And then as we look out over the next, say 2 to 3 years, continuing to meet with the public every step of the way as we go through the next, basically it's a 7,500 and final design, 3 stages of design submittals. So that's basically where we're at. That's an update. Happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
I have a question. I guess I just want to tap into your experience and your expertise a little bit on the shared use path versus the dedicated bike lane. And I see the pros and cons of both. So using the shared use lane, we can do a little bit more management of the speed on the road for automobiles. But the shared use paths, although they look good, I find that sometimes it's like the speed of bicycles and other things make them incompatible with people trying to walk or young kids walking to school, or because that is one of the goals here, is to have a safe way for kids to get from one side of Canton Street over maybe to the Downey neighborhood. But I guess you had said Mass DOT seems to like them. I just am really looking for your perspective on the pros, cons, and whether you are a fan of them.
Sure. When I guess going back to when Complete Streets first became a real thing locally, I mean, this is going back over 10 years ago, bike lanes was the true alternative. A lot of, projects included pavement markings for bike lanes. But projects have been going in the direction of safer opportunity, safer for bicyclists to get them off the road, and especially a street like Canton Street that has the higher traffic volumes. It's certainly safer to get them off the road. Has been our experience as we've seen it evolve over the past 10 years or so.
I know there's a lot more discussion to be had about it, but I feel like we've slowed the traffic. We've slowed the cars, we've made bikes safer, and I'm looking for the pedestrian safety. But we don't have to.
The sidewalk on the other side of the street, though, as it's proposed, right?
Yes.
Right. Yes.
So they don't have to be in the same.
Yeah, that's true.
And also, John, believe it or not, the bikes can use the road.
Yeah.
Even right, exactly. They can, so they have their option.
Correct.
Correct.
The proposed shared use path would be 10 feet wide to accommodate bikes in both directions and pedestrians. And one of the goals or the target users isn't necessarily the high speed bicyclists that we see keeping up with traffic in the road, but trying to see parents with their children using it as a mode of transportation to get to school, and not necessarily flying 30 miles an hour along the sidewalk or shared use path. I mean, so trying to capture those folks to start using the shared path for transportation. And the state and federal bike guidance has identified that the more comfortable we can make the facility, the more users it's going to draw.
Great, thank you both.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah. Can you guys comment how much land taking is involved? I mean, there's a certain amount of land on either side of the road that is town controlled, and then we go into private property. So just from an estimate, I know this has a lot of work to be done, but general, please.
Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, really for the most part, the project with the shared path and the sidewalk and the roadway would fit in the existing town's right of way. So with the land that's controlled by the town. However, a lot of people would perceive that as their front yard because they're just thinking all the way out to the street. So impacts beyond the edge of the street would include the full 10-foot wide shared path plus some landscape plus a grass buffer. But actual impacts on private property would be limited to temporary impacts to grade in the new elevations back into the elevations of people's front yards or the surrounding terrain. That distance varies along the corridor depending on the side slopes of the roadway. So that can increase around 10 feet or so beyond the town-owned right-of-way.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and the ask tonight is just for us to approve, an engagement strategy. So there's a lot more to come. So, I mean, I'm fine. Michael, I don't know if you have anything, or Nancy, I'm fine otherwise.
Oh, I think it's great to bring this forward and engage the community.
I do too.
And doing it.
So my only
virtually.
question would be, how soon do we have to engage the county commissioners process? Since it is part of their, as we've learned the hard way, this is part of their process as well.
Mike, you broke up a little bit. Did you say as far as engaging with the county commissioners?
Yes.
I know through experience, especially when we went through all the traffic calming measures along Canton Street, we didn't, and this was a while back, but I want to say we engaged with them. It was probably right around a 25% benchmark that we had something substantial enough to bring to them and say, here's what we've solicited thus far from our initial meetings with the public. Here's where the project is heading to some degree. And then I would say, I think it was at that point that we started soliciting the feedback from them pertaining to those devices and those measures at that time. But Mike Myers, you might be able to weigh in a little bit as well as any experience you've had with county commissioners.
Yeah, I'd say shortly after, right about the time when we make that 25% submittal to MassDOT, I think they'd be encouraged to hear that, that we've coordinated with them prior to that 25% submittal.
I think our biggest thing here too is obviously this is going to take a very long time. We have a great deal of experience in just what we have went through with that process with Gay Street from, our initial embarkment with survey all the way through the design process. I mean, we're looking at a long time frame here, and John, like you mentioned, what we're looking for is your support in doing this in really an unconventional method of a virtual platform with what we're expecting as far as concerns, rightfully so, from direct abutters, feedback, both positive and negative, and how we as the town are going to be able to address those through that virtual platform. But Mike and TEC, they've offered a ton of different examples of how they've been able to do that with various meetings, similar dynamic. So, we just want to make sure we're doing this the right way, like we do everything here. It's be as transparent as possible to the public, and let them know that, we care about all their feedback and we're able to address all of their concerns throughout this process.
Thank you, Todd. So I think we're ready for a motion.
I don't think we have to do a motion.
Oh, no? Okay.
Do we? Oh, give our approval? No.
Yeah, that was the ask.
Okay, sorry. I move that the select board grant approval to the Department of Public Works and TEC, TEC, to proceed with the virtual public meetings in order to present the preliminary Canton Street sidewalk design to members of our community.
A second.
Okay, and the only thing I would add before we take the roll is there was a comment from Michael Musto, says looks amazing, and there was a comment from David Atkins, adult cyclists will still use the road. The shared use would promote kids on bikes, neighborhood, etc. Okay, so we'll now call a roll. Mrs. Hyde?
Aye.
Mr. Walsh?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So thank you, Todd. Thank you,
Thank
Jake.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to see
Look
you.
forward to further discussion.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up is Pam. Are you with us? Pam, there you are. Debt refinancing authorization, Pam?
Yes, just very quickly, we have an opportunity to refinance or refund, it's called, two current long-term debt outstanding. Both of these are 20-year bonds. We're about halfway through the cycle of that, and we have an opportunity to reissue them or refinance them to provide savings. So one bond is the $3.5 million bond issued in 2009 to fund the middle school modular projects. And the other is the bond, the $9.3 million bond issued in 2011 to fund the new library project. So both of those, our debt advisor has guided us that it looks like if we refinanced at this point, there'd be some potential significant savings. So when we refinance a bond, we keep the same terms. We don't shorten, we're not allowed to shorten the terms of the bond, but we can reissue them at a potentially lower interest rate. The current estimate, and it would depend on what the actual rate is that we would get for the new bonds, but the savings would be about $225,000 over the life or the remaining life of the bonds, $225,000 for the Thurston project and $750,000 for the library project. So it would be terrific if we could go forward with this. The town treasurer would go out and issue the new bonds. You, as with every bond, would be required, the board would be required to accept the terms of that new sale and to sign off on the new bonds. Our debt advisor has asked that you give your affirmation tonight that you would like the treasurer to go forward and do that process. Again, you still have to sign the bonds when they are actually issued, when he makes that sale.
Questions?
Yeah, Pam, as I recall, we borrowed for the library at a very low rate.
I know.
So can you just give us points of comparison to what the current rates are and what the assumed rate is to come up with the savings that you're telling us?
I mean, the library was at a good rate. I think it was 3.5%.
I remember we were floored by how.
And they are
favorable.
looking now that if we went out now this spring, we would be at a net 1% rate, which is incredible. That's really what the market is bearing right now. Our debt is good debt, as we've talked about before. We would not have any problem attracting potential bidders for this. So that's what he's looking at. And again, if for whatever reason there was a blip on the day we were selling or something happened, we do not have to enter into the new sale. Again, you would have to sign off on that. But that's basically what they're looking at right now.
And just as an observation with a question attached to it, Peter Fraser has been our bond counsel for a long time. He's been our go-to person when we've done our borrowings. Is this a new firm that he's with, Hilltop Securities, or what changed?
He's with the same firm. They've been bought out a couple of times. It's been Hilltops for a while now, but it's still the same. It's Peter Fraser. It's still his same firm. They were First Southwest. I'm trying to think who they were before that.
Okay.
They've been with Hilltop Securities for a while. His whole
Okay, I didn't recognize it from
Yes.
past, but he's done a very good job for us, as I recall. And he knows the town really well, and we've been very successful in our bond offerings. So this is only good news.
It's very good news. Any of this savings goes into our debt budget. As you know, we have some debt outstanding to issue going forward. So to be able to reissue this at a lower rate helps with the overall debt budget. Yes, he's the one who brought this forward for us and would help us through this process.
Yeah, maybe you could ask Mr. Gavin to get us below 1%.
We will, again, this is just incredible. And Peter had some very specific sales from other communities to justify that rate. He sells helps most of the communities in the state. So when Treasurer Gavin goes out with these, that we also have some current debt outstanding that we are ready to move forward on. the Islington Library project, the first pieces of the road authorizations that were done over the last couple of years. So he would be able to couple this all together, which really helps us because it's a lot of work to go out and sell the bonds. We would be able to couple that all together and go out, but we should be able to get some terrific rates.
Great, thank you. So I think we're ready for a motion.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Sorry.
may make a point of order.
Of course.
There is a suggested motion in your packet.
Yes.
I've just lost my packet on my iPad here.
Page 27,
I've got page, okay.
packet page 27 I have.
Matt, I love that you try to use the computer. I still print out the sheets.
I'm progressing, but there, I would suggest you do it verbatim.
Yeah,
That's
I'm planning to, okay. So the motion is that in order to save interest costs, the treasurer is authorized to provide for the sale and issuance of bonds under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 21A, to refund all or any portion of the remaining principal of and redemption premium and interest on the town's general obligation bonds dated June 15th, 2009 and March 10th, 2011, and that for this purpose, the treasurer is authorized to provide for the preparation and distribution of a preliminary official statement, provided, however, that no bonds shall be issued under this vote unless and until the final interest rates and other terms of the refunding bonds are approved by the select board.
I'll second.
Okay. I will call the roll. Mrs. Hyde,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you. Thank you, PM. I know you're not going anywhere, but
That could be the easiest vote we've ever taken.
And hopefully we'll be back at a later meeting in the spring with good news on those and our other debt that will be issuing.
thanks, Pam. You're going to do the budget update?
And just a budget update, just some quick information. January is a big month for budget development. So we have been continuing to work. Chris and I work with our departments, our municipal departments and our school department working on the FY22 budget. We have, as we talked with the board previously, been working with everyone to really try to present, given the ongoing COVID situation, to present as streamlined and conservative a budget as we could for FY22. So all of our departments have been doing a great job in working towards that. We are on track to have some more information for you towards the end of the month, and that will include some additional information on state aid, but that is looking a bit better for FY22 than we might have thought a couple of months ago. All of our other revenue sources really are in line. We continue to work in the current year with trying to utilize the FEMA and CARES money to take care of as much as we can with the COVID impact. And again, we're working with all our departments on that. One other quick item to mention is we did just get at the end of December our most recent meal and hotel tax quarterly distribution from the state. And as we had talked about, particularly the hotel tax has been very volatile throughout this year. And even the numbers we're getting each quarter are not really easy to compare quarter to quarter because of the timing that the state's getting updates of that number. But the meals tax for the quarter ending December was just over $86,000. In our pre-COVID time, we've been averaging just over about $110,000 a quarter. So that's still down, but certainly seems to be rebounding a bit and might be a bit better than we expected. That first quarter with COVID, the meal tax was down at about $58,000. So seems to be a slight rebound there. Again, when we look at the meal tax in more detail earlier, we did not utilize any of that money for the FY21 current budget. We used none of that at our June town meeting. So because we did not use any, and the money coming in this year, even though it's a bit lower, is flowing into that fund where it's all kept. We continue to accumulate in that fund. Currently, there's just over $2 million in the combined meal and hotel tax fund. So we're continuing to move forward on the budget. I think we're in very good shape. Continuing to work collaboratively with the schools and all of our municipal departments. And we'll have some additional information to present to you at your next meeting as we get ready in February to move that budget on to the Finance and Warrant Commission for their review.
Thank you, Pam. So you don't need anything from us tonight?
No. Nope, unless you have any questions or other guidance, but
Pam, when is it likely that the governor will give some indication of state aid? Usually it's the cycle of late January because of tying to the Mass Municipal Association annual meeting. What's their calendar look like this time around?
well, the MMA meeting is the January 21st. And typically there's some update at that point. The state is still even just signing the final paperwork on the 21 budget. So they are delayed, but they did have their meetings over the last couple of weeks where they look at revenue projections for 21, because they always do a consensus revenue opinion. And again, it was a bit improved over what they had thought. Also, some of the additional coming out in the most recent round of federal coronavirus relief funding, while cities and towns did not get any direct relief, there were some different items which I think is going to help the state budget. There was some additional extension of timeframes that's going to help the state budget. So I think we will be okay as far as what those revenue numbers will look like for us for state aid for 22.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Okay, we're gonna move on to new business. Traffic rules and orders amendment regarding Millbrook Road stop sign. And so I know Lieutenant Vinci is here with us. Thank you for joining us. Mr. McManus is here. I think that was the leader. So I guess, Joe, do you want to just take us through like what the process is that initiates this, just in general, without talking specifically about this location?
Sure. So sometimes I get requests directly, whether it's via email, phone calls, voice messages. This particular was through the C-Click Fix part of the town's website. And it was, I believe it was an anonymous post, if I remember correctly. And they were just asking, for someone to take a look at the stop signs or the lack of stop signs on Millbrook Road. And so I did that. And then I wrote a memo to Chief Silva that he take a look at the areas that I recommended stop signage for. He took a look at that and thought it was prudent to pass on to the board. And then we ended up in that meeting, I believe it was November, where they were approved, and then they were installed, I believe, within about a week to 2 weeks.
Okay, and Mr. McManus. Can you hear me? Okay, I guess what I was just trying to get at, I wasn't at the November 23rd meeting, so I'm just trying to understand the hesitation around having the stop sign. And I guess I was just trying to look for the concern.
Kevin, his mic went on where he could talk, but then he's on mute again.
I'd be happy to speak on why I thought it was prudent.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, that's what I was just trying to get an understanding of, like the divergent of opinions. I'm just trying to understand it.
So if I could, Mr. Hickey, I took a look at it. I pulled data, which there was none for a lot of the intersections. Most of the intersections where the stop signs were added to Schedule 3 in the traffic orders, there was almost no data in the last 3 years regarding traffic crashes. However, I took a ride. Having worked in town for 15 years, a lot of that time on the road and patrol, I'm familiar with the town and in these particular areas. And one thing that was the pressing issue for me was, with the prevalence of the delivery services that are everywhere these days, it's not really residents that are familiar with the area that I was concerned about. It's more the people that are traveling through or delivering packages, just to ensure that we don't have a bad crash at an intersection where it might be questionable who has the right of way. So I thought the stop signs were prudent to just show who had the right of way. And in my opinion, my opinion only. I just thought they would do more good than harm. So that's why I pushed it through to Chief Silva, and then he took it to you folks at the select board.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Just understanding the overall overall
Mr.
process.
Vinci, has any of the neighbors objected at all, or are there anyone step up and say, no, this is a bad idea?
Yeah, we got a letter.
Should
We
be
got a
in the
letter.
packet, Mike.
So I was just trying to understand what the concern was. I think they're upset with kind of a lack of process, but I think what's kind of concerning is, like, once we've had a determination from, Lieutenant Vinci has a lot of experience in Westwood, I'm hesitant to then remove what was identified as a needed sign. That's really my, but I'm just curious.
Available to talk?
I'm here. I want to hear the other opinion.
Yeah, I believe Mr. McManus is, his mute is now off, so I think he's available.
Mr. McManus?
Yes, sir.
Hi, welcome.
How are you?
Well, so we received a letter from the residents, and I guess just trying to understand the perspective of the disappointment or the challenge with the stop sign. And I was hoping you could kind of articulate that for us.
Well, what happened was nobody was aware that there was a public hearing on the matter of the stop signs. It was on November 23rd. And under the new business, it just states traffic rules and orders of amendment. So there's nothing there in that public notice that would say that the stop signs were going to be going in or at least be discussed. All of a sudden on one day, a DPW truck pulls up and he's got a drill and he starts drilling a hole. And the next thing he's putting in a stop sign. And, one of the neighbors had asked, what's going on? Why are you doing that? And he said, I was just told to put a stop sign here and that's it. So then, if you read my letter, Millbrook Road is a length of 0.2 of a mile. My house is the last house at the top of Millbrook Road. From my house down to Route 109 is 0.2 of a mile. So if I go down the hill towards 109, there's a stop sign that has been placed there. And if you go up the hill to my house, directly across the street from my driveway is the stop sign there. So on both ends of Millbrook Road, there are now stop signs. When that happened, what happened was another neighbor had called down and spoke, I believe he spoke to Lieutenant Vinci, and asked who was the person who made the complaint. And I think she's on board with us tonight. Cindy Buckley? Is Cindy Buckley on board?
That's okay, though. I'm just trying to understand
But anyway, so what she told me was she asked Mr. Vinci and he said that he can't give out that information. And it was at that point when we had a discussion of all the neighbors that we said, well, let's file a public record request, which we did. I was the person who filed the public record request because the way we felt, we wanted to hear from the person who complained exactly what is your concern. What's going on? Why do you feel that there's a need for these stop signs to go into the street? And when we filed the request for public notice, I should be in your packet. I got it came to me from the Dottie Powers office, and it says, "Dear Mr. McManus, we do not know who the requesting party or parties was or were on the request to place the sign, Lieutenant Sheehy." The next one is, "Dear Mr. McManus, the select board does not have any information regarding the party or parties who requested the stop sign placement." So, and now we just don't understand what's going on and why somebody would complain about such a short street to be able to have stop signs at both ends of it. When you come into my house and you come up Millbrook Road, as it starts to go back down the hill over at Green Hill, there is a tremendous sight line when you get to that point looking up Green Hill Road. So you can see if there's another car coming, and you can see if there's another car coming down below you as you go down the hill. It's the same thing when you get to the other end of the street, that
you know, they have a great sight line looking back up Green Hill Road at the foot of the hill. So the neighbors all across the neighborhood, there's only 12 houses, I believe it is, in the neighborhood. And we talked and we went out, we canvassed the neighborhood and talked to everybody. And we've gotten 17 signatures in this petition to have the signs removed. Because, you know, we just don't feel that they belong there. There are 2 houses that one woman has the stop sign directly right out her front door. Somebody else, they're doing new construction on a house and it's right at the foot of their driveway. They come out their door and they're walking down the driveway and they have a stop sign there. I look out my door and there's a stop sign right there that just wasn't there before. It's just, it just seems so unnecessary because the neighborhood it just does not have a lot of traffic going on here. And Mr. Vinci noted it in the November 23rd meeting that he checked all the traffic data and he can find very little, if any at all, of car accidents on Millbrook Road. It just doesn't fit. So we feel that, you know, it takes away from the neighborhood. It's a beautiful neighborhood, very nice, well-kept homes. I know Mr. Ahern has been in the neighborhood a number of times. It's just like, we just kind of feel like we got hit over the head with, you know, boom, the stop signs are going in and we had no idea. And to this day, today, we still have no idea who made the request for those stop signs to be put in. I feel that, you know, and everybody feels, really, all the people that signed the petition feel that, you know, there was no due process with us involved. I mean, nobody asked us how we felt. Nobody canvassed us and asked us if we thought there was any threat in the way the traffic was flowing through the town. And I'll be honest with you, with the Amazon trucks, when you see them in town, those guys aren't flying around town. They're driving very appropriately on that street and they stop and they look at the sight lines before they make their turn. So we're not seeing any real need for those signs because, you know, it just doesn't happen here.
So thank you for, you know, canvassing the neighbors, and I hear what you're saying and I appreciate it. I do think, just my own initial reaction, it's very difficult to remove a stop sign once it's up. But I guess my question would be, would there be some sort of willingness to maybe talk with DPW about the actual location? I mean, they're subject to regulations, but there's always, you know, maybe some thought sharing you all could engage in to at least go through that process. And I don't know, that's just my initial reaction. I don't know if that helps.
Joe, can you comment, given Kevin's comments, can you tell us your thoughts now?
Sure. So my recollection of the conversation with Mrs. Buckley was that I did not say I could not tell her. I didn't know who it was because it was on the SeeClickFix website. And I don't know, I don't believe there's usernames. It's just kind of a concern that people post. I understand what Mr. McManus is saying and I get all of it. But again, you know, I mean, it was presented to me. I took a look at it and I stand by my recommendation. And I know that's not sitting well with the neighborhood, and for that I apologize. But again, I mean, I know what Mr. McManus is saying about Amazon trucks, but we have numerous complaints about Amazon trucks around town on a fairly regular basis. And the last thing anyone wants to see happen is for someone not to be familiar and maybe go where they shouldn't, or excuse me, go first where they don't have the right of way and for something bad to happen in that neighborhood. And that's where, as a public safety person, that's where my thoughts go.
Well, I apologize for what I said about Mrs. Buckley. I was expecting her to be on this here so that she could speak for herself rather than have it come verbatim, you know, hearsay from me. I don't know exactly, I wasn't part of the conversation, but you did tell me that you were unable to give her the name of that person. So there's a couple of things that I'm just curious about. I mean, this website that people can just go into and say, geez, I'm concerned about Millbrook Road and I think they need to have a couple of stop signs. And the reaction is you don't even know who that person is. They're totally anonymous to you. And then they come to the Board of Selectmen and they're totally anonymous to the Board of Selectmen. And the board voted to expend taxpayer money to put those stop signs in. that person could be from Medfield or could be from Walpole or any other community around us. And they just happen to be in the neighborhood, and somebody might have driven fast. I don't know, but we don't know who that person was, because the neighborhood, we're a very tight neighborhood. We've all been here for a long period of time. I've lived in this neighborhood for 29 years. And, you know, we just wanted to have a discussion and find, here's Cindy Buckley now, I see her on.
Yep.
Her husband, Greg. We just wanted to have a discussion with that person to find out what is the problem? Because is it somebody's kid who might be driving too quickly? Or is it an Amazon truck? Or is it the oil truck that's, you know, going down the road too quickly? I don't know. None of us know. All we know is that all of a sudden stop signs came into our neighborhood. So the other thing about it is, you say that you get complaints about Amazon trucks all over town. Have you had any complaints in the Millbrook Road area about the Amazon truck?
No, off the top of my head, I don't recall anything in that area.
Well, that goes to my point that, you know, it's not a dangerous neighborhood. It's just that simple. It's just not a dangerous neighborhood.
Mr.
And
Chair,
either
can I
way-
make a couple?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Sorry, Kevin, I just want to make a couple comments. One, just as a general comment, there are different reasons that signs are determined where they should go. And it's not by a process of, I want a sign here, I want a sign there, and therefore it comes to us and we put signs up. It goes through a review. So we have a position where whoever brought it forward, Lieutenant Vinci evaluated it and brought that recommendation to us. I think I would like to take the time to go out and actually go see it firsthand. I did not have time before from getting the meeting agenda and the details in tonight's meeting, but I'd like to do that because I think we owe the neighborhood extra due diligence on our part, because we're the ones that said yes, and we are the ones that can say no to it. In this case, I know that the recommendation is on the table, but it doesn't mean we can't undo it. Kevin, I don't want you to think that just because random person who we don't know asked for it, that's how we go about making our decisions. It goes through a review process, so I'd like more time.
Well, I agree with that, but you know, the troubling aspect of it is they were able to do that anonymously. And that's, you know, this is a public hearing, and this is a public matter.
It wasn't a public hearing, Kevin. It wasn't a public
No,
hearing.
I mean the meeting, it's
Okay.
a public meeting. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, so why don't we continue the discussion? There'll be some site visits, and we will put this on a future agenda.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you honestly, I think the neighborhood would like to have you come out and take a look, and you can hear from the neighbors themselves.
Okay, we will facilitate
Hey,
that with the
Kevin.
town manager.
Kevin,
Yes, ma'am.
let's do that soon.
Yes, we'll accommodate your schedule, Nancy.
Mr.
All right,
Chairman, there's two questions in the queue.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see them.
Mr. Chair?
Okay.
As you're looking at that, just to let you
Yes.
know, Ms. Buckley appears to be now
Yes.
a panelist versus.
Okay, so one of the two questions is the Buckleys are here, so welcome, Buckleys. And the other one was, you mentioned there are traffic reports or data. Are traffic reports public information? How does a resident get a copy of traffic reports or data?
I can take a crack at that for you, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. So if it's data that we regularly pull and run reports on, that would probably, absent an exemption to the public records law, that would probably be a public record, and you'd have to file a request for information, a FOIA, and then we'd review it. We have no duty, however, to generate a report and request in a response to a request. If it's not data we're capturing, then there's nothing can be generated that way. So it depends is the answer. And I'm not familiar with their reporting relationship. Maybe Lieutenant Vinci can shed some information on it for me.
Sure. So that's something that, yeah, you could do a FOIA request. That would go through my peer, Lieutenant Sheehy. He's our public records officer. And he does have the ability within our system to pull crash data at certain areas in the vicinity of certain addresses. So that's something we as a police department can certainly provide. That's
And you pull those reports regularly, Lieutenant?
Yes, we're in a new system now, a new records management system. So we're still getting comfortable with that. But under the old system, we could easily provide data through December 14th when we went live on the new system. So that's something that, like I said, we're still in the learning process with our newest system.
Mr. and Mrs. Buckley, I know you were trying for several minutes to get in. Thank you for joining us. Where we are is we're going to defer an ultimate decision and do some site visiting and some studying. But you're here. If you want to add anything, feel free. I don't want to stifle conversation, but this will be on a future agenda as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll keep it short. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
I guess I would say you have 17 signatures from 9 of the houses. You have 90% of the people on this street at least that are opposed to it. And Officer Vinci driving around and making an assessment when you have that sort of opposition, I think would require a more detailed look, a traffic study or whatever you want to call it, to determine if a sign should be put there, given the number of people that are involved. So I hope it involves not just coming around and looking, but actually analyzing the information and understanding if it's appropriate.
All right, thank you. With that, I'm going to move on, and this will be on a future agenda. Thank you all for participating.
Can I ask one question, please? Are we going to hear from the board? Are you going to get in touch with us when you're available to come out?
That's what we'll sort out the logistics of that, and we will let you know.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna move on. Okay, we are now on to Fire Department Emergency Management Performance Grants. I believe I saw Chief Deckers in here. Oh, there you are. Sorry, John. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
No problem.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about these grants?
Okay, so what we had the opportunity, which we've done in the past, as many of you probably have seen in the Gillette meeting room, we had 7 computer stations set up this past COVID pandemic timeframe. That was an older EMPG grant that we did. And we've been putting a lot of it on hold for now, not sure where we were going and what direction we were going. And the state basically came to us and said, hey, you didn't apply for your FY19 grant and you didn't apply for your FY20 grant. We'd really love to give you the money. Is there something you wanted to do with that? And they allowed us to combine FY19 and 20 together for a total of $9,200. So after thinking about that for a while, one of the things that I do know that we're lacking and something that we could use is a quick way to set up some outdoor shelter at operation scenes, or could be just for general use between towns. So when I was over at the library and they were talking about being able to do story time outside, one of the things that was joked about was that, hey, we'll just throw up some, tents and we'll do tents. Well, there's a lot of restrictions around tents and all that stuff. But what I thought would be very useful is to go and get basically it's a blow up tent. It's 20 feet by 20 feet. It would be temperature controlled. So it will have an air conditioning and heating unit in it and its own power source. So we could literally at an incident or an event, set up our own dedicated office space or incident command that's out of weather controlled, place for yourselves as the select board to meet there and be out of the weather and be out of the news and all that stuff in a secure location, obviously with the appropriate face masks on, while we're inside the building. So that's what we did with this grant. It was approved at the state level. They thought it was a great idea, and I'm bringing it to you to accept it here for the town.
That's great, John. John, why don't you just mention the total amount?
$9,200.
That's great. Thank you. Michael, Nancy, anything?
The second easiest vote we're making, Michael.
And I'm in the process of applying for a $400,000 one right now as we speak.
So now we're talking.
That, we're going after the big money. We've been very successful for the little money. Now we're going for the big money. Hopefully you'll
Hey,
see that.
when you save pennies, they start adding up, John.
That's for sure.
Okay, so I move we accept the emergency management performance grants totaling $9,200 as awarded to the Westwood Fire Department.
Thank you.
I'll second.
I'll call the roll. Mrs. Hyde,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. John, thank you
No problem. Thank you.
for all you guys do.
Good stuff.
Thank you, John.
Okay, so later this evening, we will be taking a vote to close the 2021 annual town meeting. Prior to doing that, we will have a very brief just review of the warrants. But I would point out to all who are listening a series of upcoming hearings and meetings that through our Finance Commission. And there's really a deep dive into each of the aspects of the town budget. And it can be really informative and interesting. So those meetings are on January 26th at 6 p.m., February 23rd at 7 p.m., March 8th at 7 p.m., March 16th at 6 p.m., and March 29th at 7 p.m. These will all be via Zoom. But again, that's the Finance and Warrant Commission. I don't know if anybody has anything in particular they want to reference in the warrant articles we have received to date. Nora, Chris, or anybody?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a couple questions. Probably, I don't know, towards Chris, but whoever is available to answer. So we have a budget article for special purpose fund for affordable housing. Can someone explain who's shepherding that and what the general thought is on it? Can somebody?
I can do that if you like, Chris, or we've had a couple of these over the past couple of years, Nancy. If the town receives any funding that they want to restrict for a special purpose, the GOR requires the town to set up this type of fund to hold that money. We did it for the meals tax. We did it for the school special education funds. So we're in a position where the town is receiving and could more in the future receive payments from developments to help the town with affordable housing. And this is just an accounting mechanism for the town to put that funding in the correct layout accounting wise.
Okay, thanks for that
It
clarification.
doesn't talk about how to spend it or what to do with it. It's
Yeah.
an accounting mechanism for how we have to hold it on our books. Again, very similar to what we've done with the meal hotel tax money and the school special education reserve.
Okay, so it's neither the large funding like we did a couple years ago, putting $1 million, nor is it an affordable trust fund that is something that has been suggested through the comprehensive plan. Those would, okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
No, thanks for asking. Good question.
And then, let's see, given we have John Deckers here, and I read the memo on the private fire hydrants, I just would ask that on that one, when will we know how many private fire hydrants might be the subject of a new bylaw ordinance in town?
So Nancy, when I first got here, one of the things we did was a massive campaign on community risk reduction. And so we started to slowly build up our fire prevention bureau. We added more people to it. We're doing more inspections. And sadly, we've actually tripped across some of these properties that have private hydrants that aren't maintaining their hydrants.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Massachusetts fire code, there's not a direct channel to get to that issue of the lack of maintenance. We can sort of get around it sometimes, but what we really want to be able to do, and when I started looking at what other communities are doing to fight this issue, is they put in their own ordinances. So that's what I'm looking to do. So to your question is, as you know, when I first sent out my notice, when I was looking at the things, I thought we had somewhere around 30 to 35. When I met with the Captain Pierce, again this morning, he started drilling in all the numbers, pulling all his notes together. And the update that I sent to Chris today, right now he's at 60.
60?
60. Yep. And it looks like we could, end up somewhere between 80 and 100 potentially.
Okay.
So what I really want to make sure is that we as a community take a proactive approach to this, because when these buildings were built and these systems went into place, they were built with the fact that you'd have to take care of them. The problem is, in many cases, a lot of people see the hydrants on the road, very similar to when we started to adopt the hydrant program, where people weren't shoveling their hydrants in the winter. People just feel that, hey, it's somebody else's responsibility. It's a fire hydrant, it doesn't belong to me. I never use it. What would I hook up to it? So they make an assumption that's not right. So what we want to do is we want to put the onus on the people who are responsible for it. And I can't speak at 100% certainty, but I would argue that there's probably not one resident that has their own private hydrant.
Okay.
So I
as
know
we
that,
go through the process, you're going to perfect the numbers just.
well, and the
from-
problem is we still trip across them, because even Dedham Westwood Water District does not have an active list of private hydrants, because it's not theirs to maintain. So they don't have an active list of those. So we're actually tripping across them. And we did strengthen our approach to looking for them. So as they're out on the properties, they are specifically looking for hidden hydrants.
Yeah, and if this passes, whether or not they've been identified, the bylaw would still apply.
Correct.
You don't have to know them all. I just wanted to get a sense of when we'd know order of magnitude. So you're
Yes.
honing in on that.
Yeah, we're pretty close on the order of magnitude. We're looking probably closer to 80 right now as hopefully a final number. God forbid we find more than that. And let me also go to say, out of that 80, I would say the majority of them are being maintained.
Okay.
Not finding that are 80 not being maintained. What we're
It's
doing
not
is
all.
we've found 80. We've found a handful that haven't been maintained.
Chief, when you say, Chief, can I ask a question?
Yep.
When you say, and with your help, we've drafted a preliminary bylaw. What do you mean by maintained? That means it's flushed annually?
It flushed annually, flow tested, and they follow an NFPA standard, the National Fire Protection Association standard. It's called NFPA 25. And what many of these places that have private hydrants also have sprinkler systems built into theirs already. They can normally tie that directly to the company that comes out and does the same, or they could employ Dedham Westwood Water, I think, because some of this already sits on their mains, even though they're off. I mean, we have, I think, at least 2 that I'm aware of down at Carby Street that are private hydrants that we have. I have to dig closer to make sure we have all our maintenance records to make sure our house is in order with that. But those are the things we want to make sure. So Louderbrook, 100 and 200 Louderbrook have 6 hydrants that are private hydrants. Well, that's a large property in town that if they're not maintaining that, and we're making the assumption we go to a fire, hook up to it, it doesn't work. That's a catastrophic event for us. And then we're playing catch up, having to pull up a hydrant from High Street. So we want to make sure that, all those hydrants are working and avoid a large loss to anyone in the community. So we just want to get ahead of that.
John, you're not suggesting that Louderbrook wasn't maintained, are you?
Not at all.
Okay, just wanted to
No,
be.
I'm giving an example of where there are hydrants so that people would be familiar
Thank
with
you.
that site.
Thank you.
But John, I think it is part of a bigger question, though. If we think there are private hydrants on private property that are tapped into a main, that's not being metered.
I don't know how that's handled. And I'm going to make an assumption there's a meter somewhere on that site that's picking up flow to that whole site. But those are things that we're all looking at right now. So if I showed you the spreadsheet I have on the 675 hydrants in town, I know the size of the hydrant, I know the location, we're trying to get actual flows out of it. But in many cases, the hydrants are never metered. Okay.
No, I
so
know
they-
a hydrant is not metered, but its source should be metered.
Right. So they'll have a
Wow.
water meter at the building, for example, 637 High Street has a meter in the basement that we're getting
Right.
a bill for. I would say that Louderbrook has the same thing, but the hydrants don't get metered. So like the rec department wanted to create a ice rink up at the high school this winter in hopes of keeping people outside in COVID. When we started investigating that, we were going to have to put a meter on one of the local hydrants so that we could get charged appropriately for that. By the way, they weren't going to charge us. but we would have a meter so we would know what the flow is. Dedham Westwood was going to hook us up.
I guess my suspicion is that we won't resolve it tonight, but as this warrant article moves forward, I think we'll need Dedham Westwood Water District's input and.
Absolutely. And
helping us
they're already knowing that we're doing this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, we made them aware that we're heading in this direction. We didn't want to catch them by surprise.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have one more.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
This is how it always
I'm not
goes.
going to say sorry.
We think it's like the esoteric one, and this is the one we wind up spending 2 hours on.
Yeah, I have one more for Nora, the Obed Baker. We haven't heard about that in a while. When will you have more information for us? And please don't go into the details now. I didn't mean to have the last conversation go long.
Nice and quick. I can keep it short. I will meet soon with the developer and his engineer. We had one meeting last Thursday and we're planning another meeting in the next week or two. They're beginning work on, they just have, it's still the concept level. So when the plans are developed a little bit further in the concept level, the next step is for them to come back to the select board and actually have a discussion about whether or not the board feels that they want to go forward with the RFP. So I'll be back soon, but not this week.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Oh, no, that was great. Good discussion. So I think the next piece of our work then would be to close the warrant tonight.
Mr.
So
Chairman.
we've got reserved articles for to be determined items.
Yes, and we've also reserved 5 articles.
As we normally do.
As we normally do, but given where we are with COVID and other things, it gives you some flexibility heading into the warrant season.
Thank you for
Okay. You ready for a motion?
I think so, yes.
Okay, I move we vote to close the warrant, which includes the proposed articles set forth in our meeting packet for the 2021 annual town meeting. And we publish a draft of these articles on the town's website.
I will second it and then call the roll. Mrs. Hyde?
Aye.
Mr. Walsh?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you all for that. Okay, we're moving on to approval of minutes from December 21st.
I just had a minor edit at the beginning for Tish. Tish, in the opening paragraph, it says that Chairman Hickey called the meeting to order, participating remotely, John Hickey and Nancy Hyde. So was that when Mr. Walsh came in late, and should we clarify that?
You look a bit further down, it says that when Mike Walsh joined the meeting, in that first paragraph at 5:25 during executive session.
And then I would just say, instead of also participating remotely, because you've already established that Chairman Hickey is there. So you can say participating remotely.
Okay.
Okay. So with that minor edit, I'm okay with them if everyone else is.
Do we have a motion?
Okay, I move approval of the minutes from the, let me come up with a date.
December
December
21st.
Thank you. December 21st, general meeting of the select board.
So I don't know that I can second this because I
Weren't
came
there
in
for all of
late,
it.
so I don't know.
Okay, I will
correct.
second it. And I'll call the roll. Mrs. Hyde?
Aye.
So Mr. Walsh, you want to abstain because you were out for some of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh abstains and I vote aye as well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all for that. Okay. Other business that may properly come before the board.
Mr. Chairman, may I have a moment? Okay. So I want to make a comment that probably is a little time in coming. So first I want to say that now that we've turned the page of the calendar to the new year, I've thought about next steps for me. And this coming spring, which will bring the conclusion to my 6th term on the select board. And so I've served for 18 years, and I'm very proud of all that collectively we as volunteers and staff have done for the town to make it a strong community for our residents. And we've done a lot to invest in the town through support of our schools, public safety departments, our buildings, roads, etc. And we've built a tremendous team of dedicated personnel that work throughout all the departments in town. And so I've been really honored to be a part of this during a great time in Westwood's history. So it's bittersweet, but the time has come for me to move on from the select board at the end of this term. And I will not be running for re-election to the select board, but I will look forward to helping the town in other ways. But as we all know, there's still a great deal to be done as we do our regular business and prepare for the spring town meeting and conduct the day-to-day work of the town. So I look forward to continuing to be fully engaged and work until the conclusion of the annual town meeting.
Okay. So I guess,
What do you say to that?
well, I guess what I'll say, I guess I'll not having any prepared remarks or anything. I will begin and I will end with thank you. And you've done a lot of work, and 18 years is a significant contribution, and it involved countless hours of work. And so I think it's also important that we thank Doug for the time that he also invested in your children. And we will in time more appropriately thank you and recognize you. There are a lot of accolades to be given, and we will do that in time. So I thank you, Nancy. I'm sure after 18 years, it's not easy to make this statement. So thank you, and we'll move on.
Hey, let me just say something just real quick. Nancy, it's been a pleasure. You're not leaving yet, but it's been a pleasure. It didn't start out that way, just so we're clear, and everyone will agree with that. But it's going to.
Well, I think you're not going anywhere. You don't get out of work that easy. But let me just say, a comment in the queue. Karen Meaner wrote, "Please extend my many thanks to Nancy Hyde for her many years of professional, dedicated, forward-thinking, and kind service to the town of Westwood. All the best, Karen Meaner Metzold."
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Of course.
Congratulations, Select Person Hyde.
Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure serving with you on the board for those years. It's been a pleasure working with you as town council. You have made Westwood a better place.
Thank you, sir.
You're not leaving us yet, though, so you
No,
still have
I'm-
plenty of work to do.
Yeah, back to the matter at hand, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, Nancy, thank you very much. We'll move on from that. Okay. Not seeing anything else in the queue. Looking for my agenda. Okay, we at this point, unless there are any inquiries from the public or press, which I'm not seeing any, at this time, the select board will be going to executive session to discuss one issue pursuant to general law, chapter 30A, section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for union personnel, discussion of which would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governing body if discussions were an open session. The board will not be returning to open session. At this
Okay.
time, we have a motion to go into
I
executive.
move we go into executive session for the aforementioned reason.
I will second.
Okay, Mrs. Hyde?
Aye.
Mr. Walsh?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So we will not be returning to regular session tonight. Our next regularly scheduled select board meeting is January 26th, 2021 at 5 p.m. via Zoom remote participation. The select board will be attending the Finance and Warrant Commission meeting on January 26th, 2021 at 6 p.m. via Zoom immediately after our regularly scheduled 5 p.m. meeting. Thank you all. And we are going to executive session. Good night.